All right, this is Jeff with the Big Hairy Dog. This is a webinar from Big Hairy Dog on basics of V9 tech support. There's our little outline. We're going to go through some basics here, and then the technician's toolkit and the little ECM down at the bottom there. So, all right, basic tech support. I'm going to have to agree with this first statement. All the docs that I've read all start with check drive space. It is super easy to fill your hard drive up. There are a number of ways that your hard drive can be filled up. So let's go look at my little virtual machine here and see what's going on Mr. Virtual Machine. Okay. First off, let's start with Oracle. So in a V9 installation, you've got a Retail Pro 9 folder. That's where your Retail Pro 9 executable is, your doc designs, your layouts, your reports. Your data, however, is not there. Your data is in Oracle. If we go into Oracle on the server, we should have an Aura data folder. If we go into the Aura data folder, there should be an RPro ODS. That is the database. That's the actual service that runs. It's called RPro ODS. And inside there, we have archive files. Now, the archive files are incredibly valuable in that they can be used to rebuild your database. So if I had to restore a backup from 3 days ago and I could recover the archive files from the last 2 days, I could use those archive files to rebuild my history and bring my database back to current, if that makes sense. So whereas they are incredibly valuable, they also must be managed. Now, I have not been managing these in a while. This is a virtual machine. I do almost nothing on this. So I maybe make a transaction every now and again to test a report, but that's about the extent of it. So how big are my archive files in that I don't even use Retail Pro except to write reports? So we're sitting at 2.23 gigabytes and I haven't done anything on here, right? So if you are hammering away at this with real transactional data, you would be significantly larger in your archive files. So the archive files, you see, go back to, I actually just created this virtual machine is actually very new. It was just created in August. And so it's got archive files for all the days going back that it was able to generate an archive file. Some days I may not have brought it up, but I don't need archive files this old. So if you are ever out of hard drive space and you look in your archive files, don't delete them all. Don't just do a Control A and select everything. What you want to do is you want to keep the last 30 days, 2 weeks. You want to keep the most recent ones, right? So I would roll back and say I'm going to keep some of these in here from October, and then maybe from somewhere around there just take everything else that's that's hanging around and delete it, right? If I can get my keyboard to work right here. Right, so I'm going to keep a month's worth, then I'm going to take all those and delete them. It's that simple to free up some hard drive space. If you have to take more, just try to keep the most recent ones. The last week's work might be helpful. Depending on what the problem is and what you're having to face, it might be very valuable to have the most recent archive files. So number one, when you're looking for a drive space, is to check your archive files. Number two, for me, would have to be your backup. Now, this is a virtual machine, so I don't back it up. Okay, is everybody still there? It looks like everybody's still connected. Can everybody hear me still? Not sure what's going on with my my environment here. Okay. Okay, we seem to be having some technical difficulties here on the webinar. Let's see if we can go a different direction, right? All right, so the backup file, let's chat about backup files. The backup, we have a backup routine, and the backup routine, part of the backup routine, which I'm going to show you in a minute if I can get my my ducks in a row here. Yeah, Ken, I could certainly email you on the checklist. Yeah, I could absolutely do that. Good question. Thank you, by the way. I appreciate when people put questions in. You guys can still hear me, right? Thank you. I appreciate that. I'm not sure what's going on here, why we had a moment, but I thought I was all prepared for this, ready to rock and roll, and we seem to be having some challenges. All right, so while we're waiting for this to come back to life here, let me okay. All right, so I will give you this checklist. I can actually put it in as a handout, but it doesn't appear to like an RTF file format, so I'll have to convert that in a second. All right, so let's talk about the backup real quick and what happens with the backup. And thank you for your patience. Okay, we are not. All right, let's try a different direction here. All right, dialed into a different machine, different virtual machine, different environment. Hopefully, we will not have any more issues. And I again apologize for that. Um, all right, back to backup here. Our backup script is typically positioned in the Retail Pro 9 folder. And has there we go. Okay. So this is one version of our backup, the backup script. Now, what's important to note here is a couple of things. This file here, delete and backup, there's a few other names, but it's always a batch file, and it's always in the Retail Pro 9 folder, and we can go put it in there and take a look at how that would be set up. But this section at the top here is for you and me, right? This is where we can sort of set the parameters. Then we use those parameters down here lower. So the number of days we're going to keep in our backup, the number of what the username and password is to get in and do the backup. Now the backups will start failing if you use sysadmin and you change sysadmin and you don't change this batch file, your backups will start failing, right? They typically go to like a central folder called DB backup. Now, part of this routine, this part right here, in fact, is to delete the ones that are older than the days old, if you follow where I'm going. Now, if this isn't running correctly, or if this stops running, or part of this fails, then the DB backup folder could still be backing up the file but not deleting them. That will fill your hard drive up. So the second stop I would always go to if I'm looking for hard drive space is I would go in to the local hard drive and I would check the DB backup. So next to Retail Pro 9, next to Oracle, there's going to be a folder called DB backup. And in that folder are going to be a series of backups, either compressed files or could be folders with compressed files inside. The point is that you want to check the size on the DB backup folder, and if there are too many backups in there, delete some. Now, I don't have any because I just set this up and I haven't even scheduled it yet, which we're going to look at later on the checklist. But you need like more than one backup, but you don't need 300, right? So if you had 7, you'd be probably fine. And that's what our script normally is set up to do, keep the last 7 days, right? Okay, a little disconcerting losing all your, good call, Ken, it probably is Microsoft. But anyway, keeps you on your toes, right? Okay, so to break this down really quick here, this is our little control panel. This here section deletes the oldest, whatever's over the days old period. This here is what writes a new backup, and there's a few pieces in here we want to understand, right? So here's where we're passing the password, username and password, right? This is just the mode backup, compression, yes, target, yes, that's our path above, startup after, shutdown before. So you can't back up the Oracle database unless you shut it down. So Oracle's not going to want to share. It's kind of very tricky that way. So if you try and copy or back up the database, you won't get all of it. Now over here, to revisit the first concept before we blew up and I had to do a nice tap dance, backup archive, yes, right? Delete archive, yes. So the backup should manage your archive. That's the point. So backup can potentially be a problem, and if backup fails, your archive could then be a problem, right? So this section down here, all we're doing is just making sure that all of the services are restarted correctly. So, and if you wanted to take those out and put them in your own batch file, you could have a little batch file that would stop and start your Oracle services in case you wanted to cycle them. Of these, by the way, there's 3 of them and we're going to go look at those in a bit. There's 3 of them that matter. This one probably doesn't matter. Most of us don't have practice mode installed. If you do have practice mode installed, though, you need that. If you don't, you could get rid of it. Same with the bottom, right? Okay. All right, so So check drive space. It was an amazingly challenging topic. Reboot, obviously reboot. Although stopping and starting the services may be equal to rebooting and maybe quicker, especially on a server. But there's been times when I've stopped and started the services only to have to reboot. So I got to say that rebooting is a good choice. Yes, a good question here. Can we back up to the cloud? Yes. Now, on the backup, I'm going to say yes to the cloud, but the backup is two-tiered. So you want to have two tiers here. You want to have a local redundant backup that is in your DB backup folder, okay? And then you want to take those backups and you want to send them to the cloud or to an external hard drive and swap the hard drive out weekly or something. You need to have two tiers. You need to have cloud backup. Absolutely, you need to have cloud backup, but you also need to have local redundant backup, tier 1. So tier 1 backup is a script running that keeps a number of backups on the server. There's a number of things that can happen that can cause us to go down that have nothing to do with losing our computer or losing our hard drive, right? So if I need to restore from a backup and I'm a technician, I want to have like a little folder full of backups that I can just choose my backup and go. I don't want to be bringing it down from the cloud. On the other hand, if a lightning strikes and blows away our building and the server and all my backups, I better have something in the cloud. You better have offsite data. So the answer to your question, Ken, would be absolutely. You absolutely need to have offsite backups to the cloud. Now, again, a cloud scheduler won't be able to back up Oracle unless you down Oracle first. So you could do a cloud backup, but you'd have to have a batch file similar to something like this, right? That would bring down. You'd have to stop. You'd have to basically run this part right here. You have to run that, stop your services at an appointed hour, then have the cloud backup kick in and back up the Oracle database. And when it was done, you'd have to restart all your services if you wanted to do it manually yourself, if that makes sense. By the way, brilliant question. Okay, so stopping and starting the services. Let's go look at stopping and starting Mr. Services. So on my little virtual machine here, if I click down in the Microsoft search window and type in services, it should find our services for us. And there we go. When we click on one, we type an O, that indexes down to the O's, and we should see in here a number of Oracle services. So there are three that are important, right? There is the actual database, so Oracle service RPro ODS, that is the big one. That is the real database running. The listener, that's what connects it to the rest of the world. So when we send a query into it, that's what grabs it, that's the catcher, that's what relays it in, right? And then for us, we have the Retail Pro license server. Now, I'm not sure if it matters what order you bring these down and up in. I was told back when we started this trip down version 9 to take them down in the order of least important to most important, although I've seen our ProTechs do it both ways from developers. So, hard to say. I would say right-click, stop the license server, and it should stop just about like that. It should take like 1001, boom, be stopped. If it hangs, the license server is your problem. If it can't close the license server, then open the task manager and find the license server that is actually running. And it should be, if you go in here to the task server, there should be one running in here. And of course it's not because I just stopped it, right? Well, we'll circle back on that in a second. All right, so stop the Retail Pro license server, go back up to the O's. The next least important would be the listener. So stop the listener. It should stop pretty quickly, just like that. Then stop the RPro ODS. And that will not stop quickly. That will take 30 seconds to a minute, probably, to stop. It'll rip along like it's going to just zoom through that thing, and it'll hang there in the middle as it tries to bring the service down. So once we cycle these off, and then we're going to cycle them back on, be forewarned that you cannot immediately connect to Retail Pro or Oracle. It's not really Retail Pro. So let's go ahead and start these up. It's going to take the same time to start them up. What I mean is, once Oracle starts, it's going to take about a minute or two before it will start accepting connections. So if you start this thing up and then you double click the Retail Pro icon, you will fail. It will say cannot connect, even though probably will connect if you just give it a minute, right? Okay, anytime now. Now, maybe rebooting a PC would be equal to this, right? Now we got to do the listener. I know a server takes much longer to restart than a PC. So if you've got a new fast PC, maybe restarting it would be equal to or faster than restarting the services. Not sure. So Retail Pro licensed server. Could you try again? Sorry, Siri thinks I'm talking to her. Okay, so we've restarted the services. And of course, now what I normally would do is I'd flip over to my phone and start a timer so that I know, what's going on with how long it's been, shall we say, because you really can't connect. If you try and connect too soon, you will fail. Now that we've got that rolling though, let's just go back into Task Manager and take a look and see if we can see the license server, because it should be in here too now. There it is right there, license server.exe. So if you're trying to stop the service and it's failing, just open the Task Manager, right click and end the task, and that'll shut it down. That'll kill it, and then start it back up. Now, if it starts up slow or if it starts up pretty quick but then turns itself off, you got to reboot. You have no choice. You're not going to get there. So that's been my experience anyway. When the license server is failing, it's going to continue failing until you shut down the computer, release all the memory, fire it back up. Then probably it'll be fine, and you won't even know why it ever happened, right? So, but that's my experience anyway, over and over again when I've been doing tech support. So, all right, archive files, location and purpose. We talked about that. Reboot. We got the services. Connecting a client to a server. All right, so yeah, there is. If you have a client, meaning if we look here at the Oracle folder, this is the local. The CLI here is the client. Okay, so if I am a client only, this folder here will be all but empty. It will not look like this. There'll be like a bin folder, a few files. There'll be nothing in here, basically. All of it will be in the client folder, okay? There'll be no Aura data folder. In a client install, it's pretty stripped down. But the client folder obviously is mature, just like this one is. So if you have a client installed here and it's not able to connect, you can go into the client folder. You can find the network folder. Inside the network folder, the admin folder. So client network admin, you'll find it tnsnames.aura. And this is where the connection is made to the Oracle database. So I'm going to open it in Notepad, which is fine. It's just a text file anyway. So that is the server name right there. That's the host. You can either put an IP address in there or you can put a machine name in there. Now, if you change this, you got to stop the services and restart them. Because if you change this, then it's lost its way, if you see what I mean. But not a big deal. Change this, save it, stop the services, start them back up, and then try and connect to the database. Just try and launch Retail Pro. Okay, So everybody got that path? That's your Oracle, your client folder, network admin, and then the TNS names folder. Now the local one has the same files, by the way. If we hop up and go into Oracle, so if you were changing the machine name, you'd have to stop the services, change the machine name, probably reboot, and or stop the services again, right? Then you're going to have to, or I guess you could change the machine name and edit the files at the same time, then reboot only once would make more sense. But in here, the local one under admin, it has both the TNS names and a listener.aura that both contain basically the same thing, right? The machine, the host name that we're connecting to right there. And then the same TNS names file right here. So those are the three files that would have to be edited if we changed the machine name, or if you took it from one store and you wanted to connect to another store and the server had a different name. That is not the right file. Okay, we're good on that. I think we've beat that up. We're looking for this here, and it is over here. All right. Okay, basic hardware. Yeah, I cannot stress enough. Rule these things out. It's 99 times out of 100, it's not going to be these things. But if you don't check for power issues, if you don't check the cables, unplug them and reseat them. Does everybody know how to dump a printer? If you don't do these simple things, and it turns out to be one of them, then you really feel dumb at the end of the day, right? So to dump a printer, like a receipt printer, typically you turn it off, you hold the paper feed key on top, you turn it on, and the light usually flashes, and you let go, and it dumps the memory, and it spits out the programming, and then you hit the feed key again, and it's reset. It's redumped its memory, and it's ready to go. So a lot of times, simple fixes with hardware is just reset. I mean, a printer is a small computer in a lot of ways. It just needs to get reset sometimes. The tag printers have a similar function, but usually it's involved in the calibration, and there's a little calibration button on the back of some. Some of them you have to hold down the feed key and turn it back on, and the little light flashes. So it depends on your model on how to do each one, and we can't go through every possible version. Also, I gotta stress the basics here, right? Check your workstation preferences, because if your workstation preferences are not right, then you're wasting your time on other things. I have to apologize. I connected to my main computer because that's where my other VM is, and now we're dealing with the whole chat coming up for tech chat. Hours of endless enjoyment there. So we'll hop in there in a second. And then that would take us down to the Technician's Toolkit. So the Technician's Toolkit, essentially that is our interface to Oracle. We have an Oracle database, true, but it is a proprietary Oracle database. We do not have the DBA password. So how do we get in there and do basic maintenance on it? Well, we do that through the Technician's Toolkit, right? So these things here, indexing, tuning, backup, restore, building the Delta right down here, all these things should be scheduled in your scheduler. And we should take a look at where that scheduler is. And that's down here at the bottom. They've got a scheduler part of polling, but we'll take a look at that here maybe next. And we're still waiting for Retail Pro to get to the main menu. So let's talk about scheduling. All right, so we have the V8 scheduler, the V9 scheduler, and then we have the Windows scheduler. And we've gone around and around on this. The V9 scheduler is not supported. Retail Pro doesn't like what they wrote, so the texts don't even suggest that we use it. They have suggested using the V8 scheduler. If you have a copy of the V8 scheduler, it is very, very good. It's a good little scheduler. The problem with the V8 scheduler is not the V8 scheduler. It works swimmingly well. Unfortunately, the V8 scheduler was designed to run on a PC that never logs out. If you log out, the V8 scheduler no longer runs. Now, that was all well and fine when V8 was written, but today we got a lot of concerns about security, about people viruses, ransomware. You know, I don't know that we can afford to be as casual as we used to be with our computers and just log them out and not log them out. So I think we have to log them out, right? So let's take a quick buzz at some basics here in Workstation Preferences, then let's circle back to this scheduling thing and get on with the whole show. Some basics in here, and I'm really focusing on tech support issues here, right? In printing, you know, you got to have all this stuff set up correctly. Simple errors in printing would be that we've checked off more than one printer in our list. And unfortunately, the way that they've sort of designed this menu, you can't see if more than one's checked off unless you scroll through the list. So if I have one checked off that is my real printer and it's all set up and it's got its design and it's got its paper size, and it's just ready to rock and roll, but then the other one is not set up, it's going to prompt, it's going to pop up windows at point of sale asking what printer, what design, blah, blah, blah. The cashier is going to freak out, call for support, and you're going to go, well, I know it's set up correctly. Well, yeah, but you got an extra printer in there that's not set up, right? So if you're setting up printers, make sure as a final check that you only got one checked off. Or if you really want to go to two, check two off. But I'm just going to say that is the most common printer problem I see, is that people have extra printers checked off and they can't see it. You just literally can't see it. Also, make sure everything they use is set up. So that's a new receipt, that's reprinting an old receipt, that's an SO deposit receipt, that's a credit card draft. Credit card drafts are all but dead. We don't do them anymore, right? What about laser printers? Laser printers, Craig, as far as resetting, there is a reset on laser printers, by the way. Absolutely. It's more complicated and it changes based on each printer. Yeah, and it's usually in the menu. There's usually a little button or a combination, and you have to look it up for each of those. I've tried doing standard resets on more advanced printers, and I found that the wise person just gets the manual, just goes online and gets the manual and finds out how to reset, because they're all different when you get up into laser printers. Good question, though. Excellent. Thank you. All right, so in here with credit card and debit card, nobody prints these, right? It's all electronic now. We don't even have to sign for things anymore. Like there's no drafts. They don't go in the drawer. So we're not setting up the printer per se. We're disabling the function, which is a really sweet feature, by the way. They put that in version 9, did not have that in V8. So you can just go in here and everything that's just a problem, just turn it off. Now, check receipts, that should be turned off, but I doubt seriously you're taking checks at point of sale. But if you are taking checks at point of sale, then you want to turn this off as well, right? You don't want anything wacky prompting. So, so those are really common printer problems. Down here under EFT identity, you need to have this in here, and I think it's like user one. If it's not user one, and I set this up, I run into this a few times, and I've usually checked with the techs myself because I do training and implementation mostly. I don't do tech configuration, but you have to have a value in here if you're using credit cards, and I'm not 100% sure it's user one, but if you don't have something in here and you're getting an error, ask one of the techs in regular support what that is, and you can get that in there, because that's another problem I find. That if you don't have that set up, then you won't be you'll again get little errors. The only other thing I would point out here is the user interface plugins area. This is where plugins can get set up, and the only one that really was worth talking about now is this is where your Cayenne Genius pin pad gets set up, right? So you should know your Genius IP address, or you can go into the Genius and get it. You also can you should have your terminal ID. Now these things that go into this window, and I don't have on a virtual machine, I don't have anything there to show you, but I will also show you that if you're set up right now and you're using the interface, then in your workstation folder for that computer, so under your workstations folder, there'll be a a folder here on the server for each computer that connects to it. In there, there's a plugins folder. In there, there's an eftservice.ini that has your config in it. If you haven't grabbed this file and backed it up, I would, because this here would have all of your terminal ID and your information in it that it needs. Mine's blank, of course, but the eftservice.ini is where you have all that stuff, and that's really handy to have that one backed up on the network somewhere in case something fails or there's a problem or something goes on. And if you can say, yeah, I got that file, that's your license, that's your config, that's your merchant ID, all that stuff's in there. So that's another good tech support tip, shall we say. Okay, right. So back to, we looked at workstation preferences, back to the scheduler issue, right? So the scheduler, and what does my scheduler look like? To find the scheduler in Windows, we click down here in the bottom, we type the word task. And in there we should find task scheduler, task manager, we want task scheduler. In the task scheduler, when it opens up, it always goes to the root level. Okay, that's probably better for everybody. Now, I've got a Retail Pro folder, right, that's got some tasks in it, right? Now, when you first are setting a machine up and you pop in here, you won't have a Retail Pro folder. If you're on the local scheduler, you won't be able to create a folder. And this just becomes, I used to be in retail and all the text came from a different side. It took me a while to figure out that I had to click on the library before it would let me create a new folder. Maybe everybody knew that and you guys are all laughing, and I get it. But once you have a new folder, then typically we have a V9 tasks folder, and in there will be tasks that can be imported. That's how they usually get in here. So right here you see I have a C V9 tasks. We usually have it like it would be usually C install V9 tasks. Usually this folder is in the install folder. We put all of our junk in one place. So you see we've got the clean and delete, the backup, we've got the index, we've got the tune. We don't have the SRO, and we don't have the build delta, either one. You just highlight it and you click open, and it imports the task, and then you can save it, and you have to have an admin level password to save it under. An error has occurred. Okay, the name is not valid. If that happens, and it's kind of good that it happened on a webinar, right? Click change the username or group, click advanced, click find now. It finds everybody that's in this, right? We highlight whatever we want and double click it or click OK, and then click OK again, and then click OK, and it should now, if you pick the account and you know what the account is, you should know the password, and it should work like a champ. And add that in there. All right. Now these, if I saw this right here, the operation or administrator has refused this request, I would be concerned, except that this here is a virtual machine and never runs anyway. So I'm sure that's why that's set up that way. So in real life, it should say this operation completed successfully, right? That's what it should say if you were to go into your task scheduler and look at it. If it says anything other than the operation completed successfully, then you've got a problem and it's not working right. And we need to figure it out. Now, all these tasks, right? All these tasks, let's see here. If we right click this one and go into properties, and we go to action. So I should explain that there are three pieces here. The general, we want to run, we want to run whether users logged in or not at the highest privileges. The trigger is the time. So you just click new and add a trigger. So whatever you want, daily at 12 a.m., right? So daily at what time you want it to run. And then the action is what it's going to do, right? So all of these tasks, as I started to say a second ago, have a username and password in it, right? So if you guys change the sysadmin password, which is highly recommended by Retail Pro and by PCI compliance standards, everybody says don't use default passwords. We all do anyway, right? I know we do. But But if you change the sysadmin password, then you got to come in here and change the password here. Now, a smarter move might be, and probably is, in fact, to go set up a like Technician's Toolkit user, like a user called TTK with a password of TTK backwards or whatever you want to do, right? And then give it full access to the Technician's Toolkit, and then use that in your tasks. Then you can do whatever you want with your admin password, right? That's just probably the smarter move. But anyway, just be aware that all of these tasks by default use sysadmin as their password. Okay, so that is the task scheduler as it is. We should get back down here and see what else we got to look at in our little outline. Okay, so indexing and tuning, right? All right, indexing and tuning are two of the tasks that run for us every night, right? So those actually, you should never need to do them. I mean, really, to be honest, they should be running by themselves every night. So they shouldn't need our help. The Technician's Toolkit is under Tools and Technician's Toolkit. Now, if you click Technician's Toolkit and it takes a long time to come up, like that was not a long time right there. That was pretty quick. But if it does take a long time to come up, there's a log file in the Retail Pro 9 folder that it has to read. So I'm just going to warn you that if the log file becomes to be too large, then it takes a minute or two for the thing to come up. And it's the Technician's Toolkit XML right there. So mine's 4K, so that's why it was so fast, right? If this gets to be like, 23 megs or something like the executable, then just delete it or rename it. Retail Pro has said to me, just delete it. Okay, and where is the V8 or V9 scheduler? Okay, so the V9 scheduler, we don't even install it. The V8 scheduler is called schedule.exe, and you'd have to have a copy of V8 to grab that. Great question, by the way. I could probably get a copy of the V8 scheduler. Let me see here. Maybe it was, a good idea that, let's see here. Oh, there we go. Blank V8, R Pro. Because my local VM blew up here on us and I had to hop onto our network, I'm now able to find things I wouldn't normally have access to, right? So maybe it was meant to be, right? So there, scheduler.exe, right? Right there on our network. Can I even copy this? Let's see, can I copy this? Well, let's just, I don't know if I can copy it into a virtual machine. I sort of doubt it. Well, that's crazy, isn't it? Just copied it from outside in the host machine into the virtual machine. There you go. That's the V8 scheduler. Schedule.exe from V8. Double click it, it runs. There it is right there running. Double click it again, pops up like that. And then we would go and add a new task in there. Now again, this thing works great. It's phenomenally cool. I could add a task in here, but you see that it's down here in the well showing if you log out of Windows, if you do a log out here, to secure your window in Windows environment, it's not going to run any tasks. You have to be logged into Windows for that thing to work. So the Windows scheduler runs unattended. So you don't need to do anything with the Windows scheduler. It'll run in the background. Now, pros and cons. The pro of the V8 scheduler is it's simple. I don't know what's going on with the little window there. Microsoft has to put its 2 cents in. And the beauty of the Windows of the V8 scheduler is because it shows down there in the bottom, if it fails, it starts flashing red and blue, and that's beautiful. You come in and you're like, wow, okay, sweet, I know it didn't run. But if you log out, it doesn't run. So then it sort of defeats the whole purpose, right? It's not going to work for you. Reality is the Windows scheduler is built into Windows, runs completely unattended all the time, and is more efficient. So we can set the V8 scheduler up as a service, but it's so complicated, and then it's such a pain in the butt to work on because you have to run a local copy of the scheduler to edit the task. Then you got to remember to shut it down because if you have two running, they fight each other. There's just all those layers in setting up something to run not the way it was intended, right? So the Windows task scheduler is far superior. Thank you though for the question. All right, back to the indexing and tuning. Indexing and tuning are super easy, by the way. So once you're in the Technician's Toolkit, and it is a separate executable, right? So you could set up a shortcut directly to it, right? I mean, it's its own executable. So if you wanted to find the Technician's Toolkit.exe and create a shortcut, totally could. Just put it right there on your desktop, then you could hop right into it without having to go through the menu. Your call, right? Indexing, boom, there's indexing, right? And it should actually be indexed at 1. The lower you index, the faster the searches, right? So I would normally want this to be indexed at 1. I've never re-indexed this because it's a virtual machine and it's got almost no data. But indexing a real database that's got more data than 12 lines of inventory and probably 12 transactions might take a minute or two. It's a fast process no matter what you do. So if you think your system is running slow or your Oracle database is running slow, absolutely re-index it, not a problem. Pretty quick, there we go, that one's done. Tuning is the same. I'm not going to tune it too. Probably should, but I'm not going to waste our time on a webinar. But that's it. You click tuning, you click start. It does the same thing. We watch it. Sessions is not on our list, but since we're right here by sessions, I will pop in there and note that if somebody was not being nice to you and you wanted to, you could disconnect their session as a side note if you're on the server. So if you say get out and they say, no, I just need 2 more minutes, you say, no, you don't. Kind of evil. All right, indexing, tuning, pretty simple. Backup, let's chat about the manual backup process, right? So we have a script that we run the backup things. What if I had to manually drop the database, right? I would go down here where it says backup and recovery. I would open up the backup node, go down to the lowest level. The lowest level, you're going to need to specify the kind of backup, i.e. complete, the location that you wish to back up to, right? So where do you want this to go? Do you want it to go to a flash drive? Do you want it to go to a network drive? Where are we putting this backup today? I guess I'm putting it on the C drive. C install. All right, we're not going to actually back up. I'm not going to wait for a backup. Back up the archive files if you think you need them, right? It's going to take longer to back the archive files up, but if they're being maintained and they're tiny, then back them up, right? Why not? If they're enormous and you're just moving the database over and we're pretty sure we're not going to blow it on the way over, then you don't really need the back archive files, do you? Because you got the database. You only need the archives if you need to rebuild it. So it's your call on whether you take the archives. Generally, if I'm in a rushed like tech support situation, I will not compress, because compressing, a database, a blank database is 4 gigabytes. So anybody who's got any data at all is going to be 6 to 15 gigabytes easy. So compressing a 9 gigabyte file is going to take a minute. Just going to warn you. So if you're trying to get this thing off the server before it crashes, write the damn backup, copy it to a flash drive. Right? Don't do the compression thing. But anyway, all we do is we make our choices at this lowest level, click on backup, click on start. It goes, shuts down the database, backs all the files up. This would take around 3 minutes to do, which I don't really want to do in a webinar, but it's really amazingly fast. But this is a blank backup, right? This has almost nothing in it. Yours probably will take a little longer. It could take 5 minutes, it could take 7 minutes, but it's really incredibly fast for what it does. I will tell you. Now, recovery, very similar. Once we back up, we'll have a line up here that'll show in our list. We would pop into the recovery pane. We don't need to go into the options. There's nothing down there. Typically, we highlight the backup we want, or we have to browse it and find it, right? Once we have found it, we need to say what type of backup it was. So from a complete backup, more than likely, and we have to specify the drive letter that we're going to be writing this to. That will modify the files so that it understands where it's coming from, right? So there are paths in many of the files in the database. So if it's backed up off a C drive and it's now going to an R drive, you got to tell it, hey, change these things to an R drive, or it won't work. Like if you just take a cold backup, i.e. a cold backup is stopping the services manually, right? Manually shutting them down, opening up the Oracle folder, and grabbing the RPro data, the ORData RPro ODS folder. If I just copy this here now with all the services shut down, they call that a cold backup. Not sure why. It's not really cold, but now that can only be restored back to the environment it was taken from, right? If you try and switch that to a different machine that has a different path, it's not going to work. You got to do a normal backup and a normal recovery to move a database from one path to another. Okay. Everybody good on the backup? Any questions on that one? Okay, so down into so before we hop down to the data maintenance, let's take a look at SQL Shell. SQL Shell is a lot of fun, I would say. It is both extremely dangerous and a lot of fun at the same time. So if you have a tech support problem, it probably can be fixed in the SQL Shell. The SQL Shell lets us do things like look at the database. So again, we have a proprietary database. We can't actually go in there, but we can, right? This is the database. These are the views. And if we scroll to the top, you'll see that these here are the tables. So there's tables and views, then there's BI and Prism files. But in a Retail Pro proper, you got tables, you got views. Views are composite views of tables, right? So you can't actually do anything to a view. Yeah, if you want to affect the view, you affect the table. So in the tables, you could now browse in and take a look at them. So if we scroll down here to Invin, right, we're going to find, I'm just going to help out here. There we go, invoice, Invin, SBS. So that you can see is my inventory table, right? There's the item SID, the style SID, the description 1, 2, 3, 4, etc. Attribute and size, cost, no price, right? Because, and that's the whole file, by the way. That's all of it. This is literally a sandbox. That's why I got maybe 30 items in there, maybe 40. But with prices, we can have more than one price per item. So there is, in fact, an Invin SBS price file where you could have the same SID listed more than once with different price levels and maybe different prices, maybe the same price. Depends on what we're doing with it, right? If that's the original price and it had never been marked down, then they're the same. Okay, so in here, we can do things. So like right here, if I'm on anywhere randomly, I'm on the price file, but I want to see the inventory file, I could say select, and this stuff you can look up, by the way. There's a ton of stuff on SQL statements online. Super easy to look up a select statement. Select all asterisk, wildcard asterisk from the table name Invin SBS, right? Then we click the little lightning bolt over here and it shows us what we asked for. And now select files. So I could have said excuse me, not files, fields. So I could have said select DCS underscore code. Obviously the names of the fields are right here, right? Comma, vend code, comma, description. Well, I don't need to keep going any further much. One from Invin SBS, right? So if I don't want to see the whole thing, I could tell it exactly what I want to see, right? And then I could go further and I could add a where clause. So I could say where, vend code equals NIKE. Okay, they like to use, if I could type today, they like to use single quotes, not double quotes, by the way. And syntax matters for spaces. And Oracle is extremely cap sensitive. That's why everything caps in your inventory. So we can avoid having that cap sensitive issue. Right, so if I click the little lightning bolt now, I got an invalid SQL statement, so something's not right there, equal to, maybe it wants a quote, maybe it wants double quotes. I'm pretty sure they use singles though. Let's find out. No, yeah, it's not it. Vend code, description one from Invin SBS, where vend code equals Nike. That should have worked. Not sure what's going on there. And of course, that's always the best time to have a problem, right? When you're on the stage, right? Okay, I don't know I honestly don't know what I typed different there, but clearly it's working now, right? Now, spaces, return characters don't really matter. So I've got more than one space here. I could put a return character, and I often do actually. I often separate the select from the to the next statement, the from and the where statements into 3 lines because it's just easier on my head, right? Now, if I wanted to, let's just go back up here. You can scroll back up to your statements with the little blue arrows here, right? So I'm going to go back up and re-execute this one here. If somebody, and we're not going to go much deeper than this, but if somebody bought somebody else, so if Nike bought JAD, right? I could in this area here do an update statement. So I could say update invin SBS. So update the table, right? Set the field vend code equal to NIKE, where right? So I could execute that. Then I could scroll back up and just execute my select statement. And you can see it swapped out the vendor code for me, didn't it? Now, if I want that to stick, I now have to push it. I have to write it, right? So to write it, you have to add one more statement. You have to come in here and type commit, and then you have to hit the lightning bolt one more time. So right now, you're kind of in a preview mode, and nothing's real. If I exit right now, nothing gets saved. If I type commit and I hit the lightning bolt, it's done. No taking it back, right? So you got a nice shallow little safety net there if you want to try something. Now, that being said, we have a number of queries we've written for various things to fix different problems. If you don't have your credit card translations into your credit card types in your preferences, it doesn't write the credit card type when it comes back from the processor, and then you can't run like tender rec reports, because it doesn't know that it's a visa. And this here is a statement that was written to fix that problem, right? So update invoice tender set card type equal to 1 where EFT data equals visa, right? So there's a little statement that we've written here where you can just take it and copy it and paste it into if you have that problem, right? So you would execute each of these separately. You'd copy each statement in, making sure the date ranges down here were correct, right? And then hit the lightning bolt and then commit it. So there's a number of things that we've written for various tech support scenarios, you know. So I don't need to go through all those and bore you guys with the be death by SQL, right? So we don't want to keep going down that rabbit hole, but you get what the SQL shell does, right? And if you have a problem, more than likely there's a way we can fix it with the SQL update statement. Okay, so data maintenance, miscellaneous in the SQL in the technician's toolkit. Building now down at the bottom here, I'm going to have to add that it's miscellaneous and inventory. So what I mean by that, let's get this out of our way. The inventory node here and the miscellaneous node in data maintenance is like a little bag full of tools. They have an amazing amount of little things in here that fix stuff. So on the miscellaneous tab here at the very top, if you have to update your delta, you could say, boom, check off the delta, say what mode you're in. Update just adds the most recent transaction, takes less than 5 minutes to run. Very quick. Full is a full rebuild from scratch. So that's going to take an hour or two to run. If you're updating your delta or you're building your delta, do not power the machine off. It will break the database. I know that from personal experience. So if we were going to update the delta, we would just go in here and say update, pick our company, i.e. subsidiary, click the start button, which I'm not going to do. And it would take probably about 45 seconds because I got no data, right? And in reality, most people take about 45 seconds because what do you have? 100 transactions? Yeah, it's not going to be a lot. All right, so calculate your sales order balances, same thing, check it off, pick your subsidiary, pick your date range, click the start, reanalyze dates. Be careful here, you've got two different dates. So recalculate item received dates, that's the inventory ones, and I think this here is your repeat purchase order ones. I'm gonna say with the date ones, I always go into the technician's toolkit manual and I check it and I make sure that I understand which one's what. And on that point, does everybody have access to the manuals? So this isn't part of our but it seems a very appropriate topic, right? So you can see here, I was out actually checking if I can find the database here. Where is my browser here? Okay, there we go. It's a bit weird. All right, so my.retailpro.com, right, is their database. I'm already logged in. If you pop to this page and you are not logged in and you do not have a login, then click need an account and tell them who you are, and they will give you an account. If you're a licensed user of Retail Pro, they give you an account. That's how it works, right? In here under documentation, though, everything you want to know about everything, right? If you click into V9 and search, Tech Toolkit, no results. Nice, excellent. Let's try Tech, right? Oh, Technician's Toolkit, nice. All right, so there's the manual though. So we could click in here and we can now research the Technician's Toolkit or download it to our own desktop and have a PDF, right? So I strongly recommend that you have access to their documentation portal and the knowledge base. Both are excellent. Really great resources. So, all right. So, what else is in here? You can, advance your sequences, recalculate in transit, zip codes I don't play with much. Copy your UPCs, your global to local if you're not 100%. Recalculate your receive dates. Make sure your date ranges are good on that. When you're dealing with receive dates, always make sure your date ranges are good. Update materialized views. Very odd one, very important one. So remember earlier in the SQL Shell, we looked, there was tables, there were views. How do the views get populated? They get updated every night. So if I were to go into Retail Pro and set up a new user-defined field that had never been set up before, I'm using whatever, Ox5, and I'm making it be fabric content, and I'm tracking cotton and poly and rayon or whatever, right? And I went to go run a report on that after deploying this and writing it some very many items in inventory, it would not work because reports use views, and the view has not had a day because it updates in the middle of the night to update the views. So we would then come down here and say, look, if you want to run that report today, the same day you created the field, you have to update your materialized view. Very painless, very fast. It's done. That's that quick. So, all right, there's your calculate fill percent. Let's pop up to inventory because I don't know why that was omitted off the list there in our outline, but very important screen as well. Recalculate company quantity on hand. If you have more than one store and the quantity on hand is not right, just recalculate it. It takes like a split second to do that. Recalculate committed. Strongly recommend you do this before you do a clean house. And yes, it still needs to be done. We did it in V8, we do it in V9. I love committed, but I don't trust it. Not when it comes to doing clean house. It's 99.99% accurate in V9. It's very good. But I would never roll the dice on a clean house. I'd just recalculate it, right? Rebuild your style links. If you've been changing stuff around, you need to rebuild them, you can. Recalculate your adjusted quantity tables, SRO analysis, which you can get to right in the main menu of Retail Pro in the inventory. Nobody uses sublocations. Delete inactive items in inventory. Reassign item numbers. There's a lot of good stuff in here, right? We're not using serial numbers, most of us, so we don't think we care. Probably back to checklist, right? So we went through most of these items here, right? Recalculate in transit. I'm not going to run all these. They're pretty straightforward to run, and I strongly recommend that you get to download the manual, right? I mean, if you're going to be playing in here, definitely get yourself a login to myretailpro.com. Make sure you've got the manuals and you know what it was intended to do and how to use it. So I guess we buzzed through polling real quick, and anybody has any questions, thank you guys both for throwing in good questions so far, but feel free to throw in more if you have them. Okay, so ECM. Now ECM is also part of the scheduler, right? Tasks in the scheduler can be ECM. So if your polling is failing, it could be the scheduler, it could be ECM, right? ECM is in a folder next to, not inside, Retail Pro. So on my root C drive, I have my Retail Pro 9 folder, I have my Oracle folder, and I have my ECM folder. In ECM, we have ECM.exe, which should take me to my ECM menu. And here we got stations, and I got one station set up. So okay, basic overview, right? Well, all right. I think you guys mostly, if you poll, you know what ECM is, but we'll dot some I's and cross some T's real quick here, right? So I draw pictures. Don't make fun of me, okay? So in ECM, you got a main, and you got one or more remotes, right? And now the typical pattern here is going to be that our Exchange window at the main is open, right, all the time, running all the time, ready for a connection. And the remote then processes out data. So in processing out data, those are periods, it creates compressed files, XML compressed files actually, what we call mailbags, right? And then at some point, the remote then launches its Exchange, right? And that's a send receive function that reaches over and connects to our waiting Exchange, right? And in which case, all of the files that we have here are shuttled across to the main, and then they are processed in. That completes the first half of the polling cycle. So that is the get cycle right there, right? Then we have the send cycle. Now, this could be one remote, this could be 40 remotes. Now, they could all poll simultaneously to the main if you had a big enough internet connection. Typically, you can get about 15 or 20 stores polling concurrently before you run out of bandwidth to do that. So if you have 40 stores, you might have to stagger them, like schedule some of them at 10 minutes past the hour, some at 20 minutes past the hour, even 10 minutes and 15 minutes and 20 minutes and 10, 15, 20, 25. It's only going to take seconds, maybe a minute, 30 seconds to a minute to drop files off, right? So if you just had 4 waves, you could get it done probably in 20 minutes easy. Anyway, once we have got the files, then we on the main side, we would then turn around and process out. So hypothetically, we got store 1, store 2, store 3. We make a sale in store 3 where an item is reduced by 1. That gets put in the mailbag. That goes over to processes in. The main now is aware of that quantity change, right? And then we process that out into little mailbags, and the remote does a secondary exchange, picks up these files, right, and it processes them in. So now store 1 knows about the inventory change in store 3, right? That number has been updated in store 1 for store 3, if that makes sense. So if they check quantities on hand, it's going to say, hey, if they only had 1 in store 3, it's going to say now they got 0, right? So that's the quick overview of what happens in polling. And I know for some of you guys who poll already, that was a little bit remedial, but this is a webinar and we need to make sure that we cover it, dot the I's and cross the T's here, right? All right, stations. Stations are set up to talk to the other side. So in my little weird picture, which I think I just closed, we would have at the main, we would have a station file that describes the remote, right? And at the remote, we would have a station file that describes how we talk to the main, if that makes sense. So at the main, we would say, I send inventory down to you, right? I send new vendors, new departments, new employees, right? I send everything down to you. Over here, they would be saying, I send receipts, I send vouchers, I send transfers, I send adjustments. We don't typically make inventory items at the remote, so we're probably not sending inventory, if that makes sense. Now, that is an option. You could make items at the remote and you could choose to accept them at the main, right? Who's in charge is defined in polling, right? So in a station file here, form view, there's 2 parts to this. Well, kind of 3. The top here is just how it's set up, right? So who are you? What's your identification? So company 1, 001 is the subsidiary. Store here is the next 3, 001. Station polling letter A. You could have 001, 001A, 001, 001B if you had 2 different computers that you polled in a given store. Most people don't. They're usually networked together, and there's only one communication point, right? So, so this identifies who we are, right, and what we are and how we're communicating. And then we have passwords. We usually just put in sysadmin for everybody. Then down here we have the checklist, right? And before we even look at that, let's just do ourselves a favor, because damn, I'm sure the screen is small enough on your side, and looking at this little tiny window, this has got to just kill. So let's just bring that up and make that a whole lot bigger so we can all see what we're doing here, right? All right, nobody takes the polling checklist in one bite, right? You want to jump into each little piece, right? So in merchandise, if I was a main, I would absolutely be sending most of this stuff down, right? I might not be sending serial numbers. Most people aren't serial number driven. I probably would send PI import maps. I would not send PI counts. PI counts would be coming up from a remote if they come up at all. And if I do markdowns, I would send them. If I don't, I wouldn't, right? But otherwise, I would send differences on inventory. I might send pictures, right? But that looks pretty good. If I'm a main, sending files to a remote, right? If I'm a remote, more than likely all these are set to none, because I don't send inventory stuff to the main, right? Documents here. If I'm a main sending to a remote, I have the choice of either. So if I say differences for receipts, I could send all, or I could send just the receipts that pertain to that. I cannot turn off receipts that pertain to that remote, right? That remote is store one. If I make a change to one of their receipts, they get updated on that, right? Now, in my book, I would say send all. I'm going to have to say, if a customer buys something at store three, and then tomorrow they're returning it at store one to get something else, like I want to be able to look that receipt up at store one from store three, right? So I would probably say send all, right? Plus, it also acts as an informal backup in that your data is dispersed. It's not all your eggs aren't in one basket, right? So I'm in favor of sending more data down, I guess is what I'm saying, if that makes sense to everybody. So, all right, so customers, again, same as merchandise, right? I probably send these both up and down, right? We make a new customer at the remote. We then would send that up to the main, and that would be accepted, and it would go to and would go down to all the stores, right? So that's how that works. All right, employees, yes. Now employees, and there's a few items, and employees is one of them that we manage at the main typically. So in here, I would probably be sending down all that's relevant here, right? Employees though, in details, employees new and user groups, as well as, by the way, departments and vendors. Notice that there's no difference setting here. You can't set them to differences. It's all or nothing, right? So because of that limitation in polling, you can't add a new vendor at a remote, or you can't manage employees centrally and add employees in the remotes. You can either manage them at each remote, but if you manage them at each remote, then you if you add an employee at store one, and then that employee goes to store two, and you add them at store two, they got different passwords at each store, right? If you add them once at the main and you manage it at the main, then they have the same password in all stores. Your call on setting that up, right? I would manage them at the main myself. Okay. Pricing and preferences are mostly just preferences, to be honest. And the main would typically send these down, and the remotes would not send them back. There are a few exceptions. Don't you don't want to send down default stores or the credit card configs. There's a few odd ones in here you would turn off. But for the most part, that's a rough synopsis of how to set the profile checklists up. Let's talk about profile twos, the last piece, tools here, the last piece. So this decides who's in charge. This decides who's the main, right? The main manages, the remotes accept. So this is roughly set up for in a remote, except that an employee they would not be managing their own security, right? And we probably would always accept passwords whether we're main or remote. So if I'm a main, I probably don't accept cost changes from a remote because I'm in charge and I'm managing. Does that make sense? Now, another word for managing would be I don't accept from you, basically. That's what manage means. So if I'm set to manage and somebody creates a new item and I'm managing descriptions, that new item comes in, I discard it. I do not let it get added to the database because I'm managing descriptions. If I wanted to turn off this one switch right here, then that remote could send me new items and I would accept them. All right, so that's very important config there in polling, deciding who can do what where, right? All right, back to checklist here. What else we got to cover in this area? Oh yeah, processing with command line. Yep, that's excellent. So let's cancel all these changes. We don't care. And I should probably turn this off. I'm not managing security, and we'll save that setting. And now, if I process out right now, the little menu goes gray. We sit here staring at the screen. Nothing happens, right? Because polling is invisible. Cannot see it. And it's good. I don't want my associates to see it. I don't want them to ever see it. So if I were to go down here and type in like C:\\ECM /ECM proc, that's the executable. Now if I were to add -out, so I want to process out, -show. Now I also could add, and I don't have to because I only have one station file, but I'm going to add it for people that might have more, -station ID :001001A, right? So that would process out one station and it would show me on the screen the processing out. And it would show me when it finishes, right? So if you're troubleshooting polling and you want to see it process out and see it successfully finished, right? Then you want to run it with command line parameters, right? Now, when it runs with command line parameters, if we pop back into our folders here, ECM polling, station 001001A, out, there's the 3 files that were just created, right? That's all we were sending. So they go into the out folder. Obviously, when files come in, they go to in received. But the point is I could see these files, and then I could do a send receive, and I could see them actually vanish out of this folder if I'm doing a send receive. So I would also add that it's easy enough to right click and say new shortcut, and then in the shortcut say, C:\ECM /ECM proc. You see where I'm going here, right? -out -show. Like I could have one of these set up for every station file, right? Right, so then I could click next, and that would be proc out 001, right? That's what that would be called. Then I can make a proc in 001. I could just copy this one and change the out to an in, right? So paste, and properties. Kept looking for the edit there. No edit, just go to properties, right? So back out the out, type in an in. Now that's a process in, right? And then I can rename it, and I have a shortcut to process a given station out and in without having to go down to the command line and actually type it out myself, right? So then I could just double click that. It should pop up and show me what's going on. And if I have files that are coming in, I could double click that and it would pop up and show me that it's processing in. Excellent tool, by the way. I would have those set up in a little folder someplace hidden that when you need them, they're there, easily accessed. So, okay, back to work here. Scheduler we talked about already. We've beat that pretty good. Logs, there are logs. True, there are logs. You know, my logs are going to be very accessible, but this is a sandbox. This isn't polling every day. There's no data here, right? So if I look at my processing logs, they're going to be right there, like instantaneously. And I can say view log. In real life, that takes like a minute and a half, 2 minutes to get into that log, right? So I'm going to point out there's a kind of a trick, a way around that, right? And that is to go into polling logs, right? And proc logs. And there they are. There's the logs right there. You can just open them as a text file, right? That's just so much easier to find, and you can use the edit find there. You can search for things if you know what you're looking for, and you can see the whole thing without having to scroll up and down and click on the little boxes. So anyway, your logs are in the polling log, ECM proc, or exchange folders, right? That's where all your logs are. So okay. Right, so regenerate and initialize. Right. Does everybody understand the difference between regenerate and initialize? Let's start with that. So in polling, right, in the station files, there is a button that says regenerate. When we click regenerate, you have the option to leave it in regenerate mode or put it into initialize mode, right? Regenerate is typically used, let's say that, and some of this is a little obsolete. V9 polling is very good, but let's say that we polled fine for 6 of the 7 days last week, and then we missed 1 day's data for whatever reason, right? Then the remote store would go into the period that they want, right? So they would go into, say, last week with October. So I would say take the whole month of October, right? Pick my station, and I'm missing receipts. Maybe I'm missing vouchers too. I don't know, right? Then I'd click OK, and it would regenerate all the data in those categories and send them to the main. The main would recognize it's a regenerated file and then would start scouring through it, basically by document system ID, by the document SID. It would probably discard most of the data. Because I mean, if you're sending a whole month to fill in 1 day, right? Most of the data is already going to be at the main and it's going to be discarded. So it'll take out of the file what it needs and discard the rest. That's what a regenerate does, basically. It fills in the gaps. Now, you know, in polling, when we send a file, the other end sends back a confirmation file. If the confirmation file is not received, then the initiating side sends the file again next polling cycle. So you see what I mean about being a little outdated. V9 should auto-correct. If V9 doesn't have the sales, it'll keep sending them until it gets a confirmation file from the main. I don't know that we really need to regenerate much anymore. All right, initialize. What is initialize as compared to regenerate? Well, initialize is not filling in the gaps. It's overwriting the file. That's what initialize does. If I initialize inventory, it's going to overwrite the inventory. It's going to take everything at the main, push it to the remote, boom, done. So initialize is great if you're opening a new store or have a new PC or you're replacing a PC and you lost your data at the store, right? And in that scenario, by the way, if we lost the data at the store, we would do both initialize and regenerate, right? We would initialize the preferences, the inventory, right? and then we would regenerate their history back as far as they need to have. Maybe they need a year's worth of history, right? So that's what those are used for. They're on our checklist. I think we've dotted that I and crossed that T. Anybody have any questions on that? Does not look like it. Okay, so most common polling situations, well, port forwarding. I don't really have a router here. I'm not going to access the Big Hairy Dog router. I don't know that I have access to that. But does everybody understand what port forwarding is? And that's enough, maybe enough right there. So all right, we got our main and our remote, right? So we have this thing called the internet up here, right? So at each location, we have a router and a modem/router, whatever we have, right? So we have our little modem router. It goes to all of the computers, right, at a given location, right? So same over here. Maybe we got two computers over here. The modem has an IP address. That's an external IP address, right? So again, the modem over here has an external IP address. Now, the computer inside, it also has, but this is an internal, right? It's an internal IP address, right? What's the difference? Like, wow, really? You got more than one? So on my local computer right here, if I go in here to a command prompt, right, and it pops to the wrong screen, of course, and we type ipconfig, right, I'm at 192.168.19.1 apparently. Internal IP addresses, 192.168 is an internal non-internet routable IP address. So that's an internal IP address right there. If I click on, the internet and I say to Google, what's my IP, right? It's going to tell me my external IP address. So I just happen to be sitting at this IP address right here. That's what everybody can view outside, right? So that's the external IP address. And then I have an internal IP address, right? So if I'm sending from this polling computer right here, I'm sending files up through my router, up through the internet to this IP address right here. How does the data get from here down to the processing computer inside here? Well, in the router, there's something called port forwarding that we would say when you see something come in on the polling port 20,000, right? Forward it to 192.168.1.5 or whatever, right? Whatever the address of that computer is. That's what port forwarding is. So anyway, if we're polling, that main IP address, right, needs to be static, if that makes sense to everybody. So this here should be the same, should be a static IP address. If the ISP changes your address, you stop polling, right? That's what happens. And because of that, we often poll in what we call the wagon wheel sort of scenario, where the main is the hub and the remotes are the spokes, right? So again, we can poll from more than one location concurrently at the same time, right? So all these four stores could be sending data in simultaneously to the main, and we could accept multiple connections. If we tried to push data out, I would have to do it sequentially. I would have to push and then push, then push, then push. It would take a lot longer to do polling. Okay. So that's what port forwarding is, and that's what a dynamic IP address is, what almost all of us have. If you're at home, like I'm at home, I have a dynamic IP address. I'm not paying for a static IP address, right? There's no reason to. All right, so anyway, ECM proc stuck. This is kind of an old issue, but it's in our checklist, and it actually is a good thing. What happens is ECM Exchange can get stuck. So if we go back here, let's look at so there's our ECM Exchange service, right? It's actually running in the task manager, and I could shut it down and restart it if I wanted to, right? Or I could go into services and do the same thing. I believe it's also showing in there. Sometimes it gets clogged, it gets stuck. Now, you can, if you need to, set up a file. So you can set up a file, nice, right on the cusp of the page, huh? Called ecmproc.ini, right? So you could copy that, then you would put this and this inside it, and you would copy it into the ECM folder. And that would basically make it timeout after 15 minutes and reset that little ECM exchange. Now, the exception is the file is ignored if auto proc rules are used. So most of us use auto proc rules, I got to tell you. You can schedule all the tasks independently, or you could just go in here to options, Workstation Preferences, and you could say, look, when you see incoming files, proc them in immediately, right? So I got to say, most of us use the proc in immediately thing, absolutely. For process out, we actually schedule that usually, but and that little thing in our little write-up here is actually documented pretty well. And I can't seem to find my my knowledge base here. All right, so okay, Retail Pro, right? Documentation, Retail Pro 9, ECM. What do we got here? We got ECM proc.ini, right? Copy that, pop that in here. No matches, nice. I just did this and it worked. All right, I seem to be failing here on that search. All right, well, I'll do real quick here, if you're going to be hanging around for a second, I will see if I can convert this file and add it as a handout. And Ken, I'll look up your email and send it directly to you so that you make sure you get it, because you actually asked for that. So I'm going to say we can do that. That's not a problem. Let's close this real quick and open up Word, more properly Word here, as opposed to just WordPad, which is killing me. Okay, let me open that thing up in Word so I can save it as a doc, and then I should be able to attach it as a handout, and you guys should be able to just grab it. Open, perfect, file, save as, a Word doc. Let's see if that works. Okay, there's the Word doc. And okay, all right, that's not letting me do it through there either. Gotta love that. All right, select all, copy. I guess today is my day for tech support challenges in a tech support webinar, right? I guess that's the theme of the day, right? See if we could do this. Paste. Okay. File. Save as. Desktop. Fine. Let's see if it'll take a Word doc. I mean a notepad. Huh. It is not letting me upload any documents. I apologize for that. So if you guys want this outline, I can get it to you. I can just email it. I can have it emailed to you guys if that's what you'd like. Ken, I will certainly email it to you. Does anybody else want me to email it to them? If you're still connected here. Well, all right, then I'm going to say thank you. Ken, I'll give you that email in just a minute. And thank you very much for sticking with me for all this time. Pretty boring. Thank you for being patient through my little hurdle that I had there in the beginning. And everybody stay safe out there. And we will do this again. Thank you very much. All right, bye-bye.